small streams, skirted with timber, intermingled with shrubbery, until the 3rd day of May, when we arrived at the Kaw, or Kansas River, near the residence of the United States agent for those Indians. The Kaw, or Kansas Indians, are the most filthy, indolent, and degraded set of human beings I ever saw. They live in small, oval huts, 4 or 5 feet high, formed of willow branches and covered with deer, elk, or buffalo skins. On the 4th of May we crossed the river, and on the 5th resumed our march into the interior, traveling over beautiful rolling prairies and encamping on small streams at night until the 10th, when we arrived at the River Platte. We followed up this river to the forks, then forded the South Fork, and traveled up the north until the 1st day of June, when we arrived at Laramie's Fork of the Platte, where is the first perceptible commencement of the Rocky Mountains. We crossed this fork and traveled up the main river until night and encamped. The next day we left the river and traveled across Black Hills nearly parallel with the generous course of the Platte until the 9th of June, when we came to the river again and crossed it at a place called the Red Buttes, high mountains of red rock from which the river issues. The next day we left the river on our left and traveled the northwest direction, and stopped at night on a small spring branch, nearly destitute of wood or shrubbery. The next day we reached at a stream running into the Platte called Sweetwater. This we ascended to a rocky, mountainous country until the 15th of June, then left it and crossed the divide between the waters of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and encamped on Sandy Creek, a branch running into Green River, which flows into the Colorado of the West. The next day we moved down Sandy west-northwest direction, and arrived at Green River on the 18th of June. Here we found some white hunters who informed us that the grand rendezvous of the whites and Indians would be on a small western branch of the river about 20 miles distant, in a southwest direction. Next day, June 20th, we arrived at the destined place. Here we met with 2 companies of trappers and traders. One was a branch of the American Fur Company, under the direction of Messrs. Drips and Fontenelle. The other was called the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. The names of the partners were Thomas Fitzpatrick, Milton Sublette, and James Bridger. The 2 companies consisted of about 600 men, including men engaged in the service, white, half-breed, and Indian fur trappers. This stream was called Ham's Fork of Green River. The face of the adjacent country was very mountainous and broken, except the small alluvial bottoms along the streams. It abounded with buffalo, antelope, elk, and bear, and some few deer along the river. Here Mr. Wyeth disposed of a part of his loads to the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, and on the 2nd of July we renewed our march towards the Columbia River. After leaving Ham's Fork, we took across a high range of hills in a northwest direction, and fell on a stream called Bear River, which emptied into the Big Salt Lake. This was a beautiful country. The river, which was about 20 yards wide, ran through large, fertile bottoms, bordered by rolling ridges which gradually ascended on each side of the river to the high ranges of dark and lofty mountains, upon whose tops the snow remained nearly the year round. We traveled down this river northwest about 15 miles and encamped opposite a lake of fresh water about 60 miles in circumference, which outlet into the river on the west side. Along the west border of this lake the country was generally smooth, ascending gradually into the interior, and terminating in a high range of mountains which nearly surrounded the lake, approaching close to the shore on the east. The next day, the 7th, we traveled down the river, and on the 9th we encamped at a place called the Sheep Rock, so called from a point of the mountain terminating at the river bank in a perpendicular high rock. The river curved around the foot of this rock and formed a half-circle, which brought its course to the southwest, from whence it ran in the same direction to the Salt Lake, about 80 miles distant. The sheep occupied this prominent elevation, which overlooked the surrounding country to a great extent, at all seasons of the year. On the right hand, or east side of the river, about 2 miles above the rock, were 5 or 6 mineral springs.